So upon my stay in Sing Sing, I come across a charismatic individual by the name of BlueBoy. I was in search of my history and my culture, which is what most inmates do when they're locked up and time goes by. You learn yourself, your people, your culture, your heritage. You learn about it. We don't learn about these things in school or in the street. So when I come across him, I had asked him if he can write me some stuff so that I can send out for some material, books or whatever. He said, I got something better. You can get these microfilms. And he wrote down some cases. And these cases were of some known revolutionary groups that I have only heard just slightly. And as I'm going through them, I realize that these cases are from known revolutionists, such as the Macheteros and the FALN, etc. Now, in these writings, I already knew that Blue was Machetero, but in these writings, he confirms and he writes, he signs his name as El Rebelde Azul. Right? And he writes little, always keep learning. He writes little inspirational things to help you and push you into learning. Upon my earlier first times getting material from him, actually the first time I got material from him, he came to my cell and he handed it to me. So I finished it like in a day. I was like so open, I grasped and I read everything like a novel. Now, these kind of books, you don't read like novels because this is history. You just don't glance through this. So I went to return it to him, and he had asked me one question that was literally right in front of me. He takes the paper and he goes, oh, you read this? I was like, yeah. He goes, what was Lolita Lebron's birthday? And I was like, he's like, yeah. Read this, learn it, and then come back for more material. I was like, oh, wow. I looked at it in the front. Clearly it says Lolita's birthday was on November 19, 1919. Now, how could I not remember 1919? Easy, I wasn't paying attention. He corrected me and was like, take this back and bring me, when you know and you grasp this, bring it back and I'll bless you with more material. So that was the start of grasping everything that I was reading and analyzing and really studying everything. Not only my history, my culture, or black cultures, or any other cultures, but my surroundings as well. Now, I had wrote this and somebody made a clapback video about that. He was only putting in our minds things about Puerto Rican history and our cultures, which is absolutely correct, because Macheteros stood for your Puerto Rican people. Now, as I'm going through these Machetero files and everything, I kind of realized that, these people, Macheteros, are not gang members. They are an elite militia. They are a military group. They're not a gang. This military group was known for attacking naval bases. They waged war on the U.S. military. No gang has ever waged war on the U.S. military. It was public enemy number one, assaulting naval officers and bases. What was the reason for that? The reason for that was that the world's biggest naval base is in Puerto Rico, in the island of Vieques. And on that naval base, they conducted a lot of bombings, a lot of experiments, a lot of radiation, which caused all the islands neighboring Vieques and the mainland, Puerto Rico, to kick up a high percentage of cancer patients that was in these areas. It was obvious what was going on. The radiation from the bombings and experimental military ploys that was on Vieques and the surrounding islands was spilling out into the ocean, which was spilling out into the island, and people were catching cancer at a high rate. Now, prior to that, Puerto Rico had been slapped in the face through genocidal pills, of which females were given aspirins, but later on it came out that it was actually birth control against their will. All that being said, Puerto Ricans were the guinea pigs. So these people, the Macheteros, that's what they was fighting for. Now, BlueBoy was locked up, and I'm sure, and I'm almost positive, he had anything to do with that. Once the Macheteros, the FALNs, and all these clandestine Puerto Rican groups that was fighting to remove the military from Puerto Rico and was also fighting to try to become independent from U.S. rule. Oh yeah, this was a cause. And it still is in some places, but it's not a popular one. So when he wrote this, I really understood what was the real cause. When you turn this around, he had also wrote down these books. And these books are of Women on the Edge of Time by Marge Piercy. Can't Jail the Spirit. Political Prisoners in the U.S. Hauling Up the Morning. Guerrilla Warfare by Che Guevara. Excellent book. Agents of Repression, the FBI Secret Wars. COINTELPRO by Kathy Perker. Counterintelligence, a documentary look into America's secret police. This man had an arsenal of revolutionary stuff. His cause was for the prisoners, political prisoners. You see, when the Macheteros got locked up, it wasn't about releasing the naval base from Puerto Rico, because other groups sprung out and was taking care of that. The Macheteros cause now was the political prisoners that was locked up, that got locked up and got hefty sentences for bringing out that cause, for bringing out the main cause, which is U.S. rule on foreign soil. So pretty much, the political prisoners, it was about releasing the political prisoners. It wasn't about fighting the military. It wasn't about fighting U.S. It was about releasing the political prisoners, which was made up of Macheteros, FALN, and other groups, to fight for what they believed in. It was releasing these prisoners. Now, Hillary Clinton released the first bunch. Then Obama released the next one. 2 presidential pardons. So now we have 2 presidential pardons of groups that were once labeled terrorists. The cause did not become Puerto Rico at this point for the Macheteros and the FALN. They were now known as political prisoners. The cause became to release them. And now, because I know this knowledge and I study this and I'm aware of it, every year that I went to the 116th Street Festival, the Puerto Rican festival, every year, from 2010 all the way up to their release in 2017, I signed a petition. If you went to 115th and 3rd, there was always groups of college kids that was always standing there with clipboards, with informations about the political prisoners, and all they wanted was your signature to be added into a petition to ask the sitting president to release these political prisoners. Yes, Obama heard us. All those signatures, years after years after years, they finally start to realize that taxpayers are supporting these political prisoners. So people like BlueBoy did their job in that part where they spread the word. And people like I was sharp enough to grasp what was going on, took that knowledge, passed it on, and I was not the only one signing these petitions. Everybody that came with me signed these petitions. So whether he knows it or not, he did a lot. And he was a part of the release of these prisoners. So was I, so was everybody who was an attendant of the festival that signed that paper. So that was much more than a gang. It's not a gang at all. Public enemy number one don't make gangs. Gangs don't make public enemy number one on FBI files. Terrorists do. Men of mayhem do. I remember one time, this individual sat down with Hassan Campbell. And I don't mean to name drop, but I have to because he dropped a jewel. He said, I don't know I don't know how somebody can have 1,000 men at their disposal and still be broke. He actually went on to say that he knows Crips that got more money than the actual homies. And that made a lot of sense because the Macheteros was actually responsible for holding a handful of men and pulling off one of the biggest Wells Fargo heists in the history of the United States, which Victor Herrera walked off with $7.2 million from a Wells Fargo warehouse. That money was used to fund the cause. Calling them a gang, super understatement. These guys were capable of pulling things off that no one is able to comprehend till this day. So for that being said, little history lesson, respectfully. Catch my next video.